Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Defuse. I'm I Hold Shift.
And I'm Austin Visions Neil.
This is your go-to CDL recap talk show. At least we hope so. At least it's our go-to talk show. I don't think you're on any other talk shows, are you, Austin? Are you not?
I don't think so.
Telling me something?
No.
You don't think
not.
so? I've
That's
heard
right.
that answer from way too many ex-girlfriends. I don't think so. Not to say that you're going to be an ex-girlfriend of mine or anything like that, although you'd be probably one of the better looking ones that I've had recently.
Okay.
But as we go forward, I'm just going to slide right through that. We've got a lot to talk about, a lot of playoff implications as far as what exactly is going to happen with our final four teams that are involved and what are the Paris Legion potentially hoping for, if anything at all. Let's take things off, though, with where the day started. Atlanta FaZe going up against the Dallas Empire. Another rematch between these squads. We've seen it probably actually, I think now, not after this first meeting, but the second meeting. We actually have seen this matchup now more than any other head-to-head matchup. And, well, you thought for a moment maybe that the Atlanta FaZe was going to maybe drop the ball on one of these first two maps, but they clutch up 250 to 219 on the Gunrunner. And then, well, actually, it's Gunrunner all the way through. I said it was 250 to 219, and then it's 6-5. And then it would eventually close things out by 5 points on the domination.
Yeah, this was a super close series. I mean, you look back on this and a couple things go a little bit different for Dallas, and we might have ourselves, a totally different scoreline in this one. But for as far as what we were able to get, I mean, coming in towards this, I think we got to see a little bit of what we saw from FaZe earlier on and towards the year, right? They showed a lot of how they were able to find successful breaks, do what they were doing off the back end of Simp and aBeZy, who are also starting to hit that crazy championship form, right? You had aBeZy, I think, ended 1.39 KD over the course of yesterday and today. aBeZy right behind him at 1.27. So the Tiny Terrors are most absolutely coming right back in towards the mix here at the absolute perfect timing. So a lot of things went right for them, and I think they were able to adjust to the hard point in particular really well. And I just don't think Dallas were a little bit fast enough to be able to deal with a lot of that pressure.
I think the other side of that coin, though, I was actually pretty impressed with how Dallas played. They were up early in the Gunrunner hard point. They found their way to deal with aBeZy's very aggressive pressure on Search and Destroy. I thought for a second that, okay, this one has the legs to go 5. And they also had that little bit of a possible comeback at the very end of the Gunrunner Dom. Everything was very, very tight, very, very close. And even though this one will read as a 3-0, you kind of heard Glacier talk about it in a following interview saying that, hey, all three of those maps were actually tragically close. So don't write us off yet, even though it will read as a 3-0. But the good news, I would say, overall with the Atlanta FaZe, they came off that 0-3 pretty embarrassing loss versus the Chicago Huntsmen in their previous result that they had from the New York home series. They obviously blow right by the Minnesota Rocker, which I think everyone would have expected. But then to come out and take a Dallas Empire team, which, to be fair, they do hold a very convincing head-to-head record against, but to do it in 3-0 fashion, that's got to be a pretty big ego boost for these guys.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, there was a lot of different things I think Atlanta FaZe also tried out for themselves too. And the Search and Destroy in particular, like you said, it was a nail biter. It was around 11. And at the end of the day, I mean, I think there was also a couple different plays that Priesta, Simp found openings within Dallas. So there's definitely some weaknesses. You're seeing, some of the Kings bleed here for as far as we get towards the later stages of the season, more and more strats being pulled out. And overall, I mean, this one could have went either way. I'm sure it's another rematch we might end up getting too. But yeah, I think it was a really exciting one to start off the day and kick it off.
Yeah, very excited. I guess the biggest thing is that this Atlanta FaZe team has absolutely now shown that these guys are back. They're ready to go. So that's really, again, an encouraging start on the day for the Atlanta FaZe. But then coming up next, another barn burner as the Chicago Huntsmen would play up against the Toronto Ultra. Get that smile off your face, Austin. I already see it, man. I know that Mr. Proper, if he's out there somewhere, is saying he said definitely the Toronto Ultra will beat the Chicago Huntsmen. I was more second guessing of it. And let's be candid. A bit of an unfortunate map 4, although to be fair, Toronto was in a very convincing spot before Pristini was unfortunately kind of struck out with his power. But that first map, as where I want to start things off, as you typically would, Toronto was getting heavily out-rotated, hard committing way too much for old time on these hard points. And I was really worried about this Toronto Ultra team as if they were going to be able to keep pace with the Chicago Huntsmen.
Yeah, I mean, map number 1, you also had one of your star players, I think, Cammy, have a real slow start. I believe you finished that one, I think, 13 and 29, something along those lines. So it made it very difficult when you don't have your main Slayer who's putting up the numbers that he typically does. It just obviously showed that, all right, they weren't able to kind of have those strong setups, those multi-kills that win them rotations. But I definitely think that they were just a little bit behind for as far as what they were doing. And I also believe that was actually one of Toronto's picks for as far as how they wanted to play and start off the series. And that was kind of a big test. We talked about whether or not they were going to be able to go up up against Chicago, who looked so strong on that map. And overall, I think it was a bit of a limit test for as far as what they were able to do. Still very, very close, lots of back and forth. But yeah, the map number one was tough for Cammy. But as that series went on, Cammy was able to show us, listen, all right, I had a bad map number one here, guys. But when it got to the search and destroys, we saw some of the craziest snipes I think we've seen all year. I'm pretty sure Cammy had 20 kills with the sniper here today. And there were some flashy highlights that you could really go back and look at for as far as how some of those really came through.
You know, it's funny because we talk a lot about sniper rifles. Obviously, Wuskin's at the top of the conversation simply because he does hold the current kill record, and then God Rex was right below him. But Cammy, I think since the recent addition of players like Kleenex and all that, he can be trusted to hold back that sniper rifle now where he doesn't have to do it all. That was the biggest thing when we talked about Toronto back in the day was who in the world is going to step up and help Cammy? And now that you're finding yourself in a position not just to beat Chicago, but even in that map number one, you can contest with these guys with Cammy having a poor map. That is really good for the overall outlook for the Toronto Ultra as they make their way not just into tomorrow, but of course into the playoffs, depending on where exactly they find themselves, whether it's the early stages of the losers bracket or if they do end up making a way to make that top 8 seed flip happen and get themselves into the winners bracket. But beyond that, I think we also saw a Chicago team that is starting to look maybe like you had mentioned at one point in time throughout the day. We are kind of getting more questions about their search and destroy. It takes them round 11 to get past Seattle yesterday. It takes them round 11 to get past the gunrunner on Toronto. And then the Piccadilly, Toronto was masterclass pretty much all the way through, even though it did go 10 rounds.
It did go 10 rounds, but you're absolutely right. I think that there was just a lot of adjustments, which is exactly what Search and Destroy really comes down to for the most part. It's being able to read kind of what your opponents are doing. And yeah, they made a lot of those adjustments. And Huntsman, I just don't think I've been getting a lot of good practice. I tuned into a lot of their scrims this week, and it just didn't seem like they were at a point where I was seeing them actually get some strong, good practice where they were making improvements and getting better from where they were last week. That was, I think, the biggest downfall for as far as me personally with the Chicago team. And they have a lot to certainly work on here heading in towards God Champs.
You know, the thing about it is it's such a heartbreaker because this one is a reverse sweep, but I'm putting a massive asterisk on this because Petra was one of those maps that you can have a really bad first rotation of hills and still come back as long as you just play a clean middle of the map the next time around. And that was right around the point where Pristini unfortunately lost power. It was right at the end of P3, going to P4, a rotation which you saw Chicago was trying to get the legs to contest against Toronto with, and they just weren't able to quite get there. So in your mind, was this reverse sweep maybe more impactful to the mental state of Chicago than it actually was, you know, the playing scope of which we kind of affiliate to Chicago Huntsman? Because it really did feel like after that Petro, they came out completely flat on Piccadilly, not really being able to respond at all to Toronto, what they were able to put up early.
It's really tough to say. I feel like, this team definitely has a lot of people that can help them regain back from like what are some of those tough spots. And I don't think, Chicago were too heartbroken losing that series in particular. There was very likely a chance that they close things out in 4 if Pristini doesn't end up, obviously dropping due to his power going out with the hurricane coming through.
Yeah.
And, it's very possible that they end up closing out the series right then and there due to how strong they've been in hardpoint this entire year. So I don't think that they go mental boom. I think that they're definitely a lot of things for them to work through. And I think this might be a really good event for them in particular right now, Alan, because like I said, they haven't been getting a lot of good practice. And when you don't even make it towards Championship Sunday as a team of that caliber with those players that are obviously just coming off of a crazy accolades over the years, it's going to maybe, I think, kind of hit them and say, all right, let's stop maybe with the Warzone streams as much. Let's start to get together a little bit.
Thank you for bringing that up.
And let's actually get ourselves to a point where, all right, we're going to be the best team. We're going to win COD champs. In order to do that, you have to be putting in the most work. You have to be learning. You have to be evolving. There's a lot of time. There's about a month worth of time to be able to get yourself to a point where you're going to be back up to that standard that they will be at. And it's really up to them on whether or not they're going to put the time into, I think, get back up there.
This is still a top 3 team in the league across every single game mode, rank-wise, statistically. That's, I think, the best news, I think, for Chicago. And yeah, I think you maybe got caught by surprise a little bit by, obviously, Toronto. But even before that, just that search and destroy versus Seattle, I think it's really starting to showcase that, yeah, we do need to go back to work and get ourselves going to make sure we are in prime form. And we saw it from Dallas. Crimsix was saying, put down Verdansk. Let's go ahead and just get on the game, get on CDL playlist. Let's get better. Speaking of getting better, though, we had a chance to see if Minnesota would have any extra favor versus the Florida Mutineers. Surprise, they didn't. So as we take a look at this Florida Mutineers team in total, I will save the conversation on Minnesota, at least mostly at large. Florida had an opportunity to potentially come back on that Azir cave and maybe steal it away from the Minnesota Rocker, who did have a pretty wide gap to play with in the very early stages of this map. But from there on out, I can't, I would be remiss rather if I did not spend more time talking about Awakening's presence on Search and Destroy. This is a Florida team where right now in Search and Destroy, believe it or not, they are actually the 7th ranked team in the CDL when it comes to search. So you need someone to step up if you want to make a championship run. And it's really encouraging to see Awakening put out the performance that he has, not just today, but in the weekend as whole. He's broken 14 kills, I think, in every single search and destroy so far this weekend.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he has a total of 55 so far over a course of yesterday and today, which is that is nuts. That is absolutely insane. And for a team that also has a lot of really good search and destroy players, like Havoc, obviously the one that comes to mind. He used to absolutely grind at 1v1s, 2v2, specifically in World War II, where I think a lot of his uprising came from, and a lot of his intense shot calling within that game mode, I'm pretty sure plays a pretty big factor on where Florida Mutineers are kind of making and deciding where to go on their offenses. But overall, I mean, you obviously have to call for someone more than Awakening to be able to step up here with them, and that's obviously been the biggest problem so far coming in and looking at them, especially when they play up against teams like Dallas who are able to figure them out and maybe stop them from making some of those more aggressive plays that Havoc would be the opening player to do so. So a lot of good studying, I think, coming through from I guess Dallas in particular, where they've matched up against them a couple times now. They have not been able to find maybe that same success against some teams that maybe aren't as highly ranked within Search and Destroy. So there's definitely some problems for as far as that. But I mean, the series as a whole for us, Alan, Mutineers definitely doing what they do best. I think it was just the map number one little slip up where you played them on their best possible map, and the ARs maybe just didn't play as big of a presence as they had to in order to be successful.
Yeah, and beyond that, this is again a Florida Mutineers team that is starting to showcase that on domination, they're starting to turn into a two-trick pony. We have not seen them play Gunrunner in some time, which to be fair, they are just 1-4 on. And when you only have 3 maps to choose from, it's okay to have a hard veto, I suppose, especially with how good they've been on Petro. And up until really the last weekend and a half, I guess you could say, they had been very good at Hackney Yard. Now we get to a point where they're actually 2-3 on the map in total over the last 5 times they've played it. So maybe some cause for concern there. But this is a Florida Mutineers team that's experimenting a lot, I think, with the setups on what I guess we could call is their comfortable map picks when it comes to Dom. It's just weird to say that because there are only 3 maps to pick from. But now on the other side of the coin, for the Minnesota Rocker, how lucky do you feel to be starting in the top 8 right now? Because this has been, atrocious. This has been bad. This is now 3 weeks of not winning a single match in a row. And beyond that, this is now 8 losses in a row and 10 of the last 11 that they've lost.
So heartbreaking, Alan, because there's a lot of talent on that squad, and they were like the dark horse, at the beginning of the season, right? It's like everybody looked at the rosters and did their power rankings before we saw them, and it's like, all right, Minnesota Rocker, probably not a team that you would argue to be within the top 4, top 5, and they were able to prove it very early on. We had kind of maybe attended that too. All right, maybe they got an early read on the meta, and they were able to play off of that correctly, but either way, it just seems like they haven't made any changes. There's nothing drastically that's being made towards some of the positionings and who's running what guns, it feels like. So besides Seam really picking up the M4A1 with the tack light snapping on people up close, I haven't really seen anything from them that says that they're changing things up. So it's just been a real big question mark and a real big problem.
The Search and Destroy has been atrocious. Since the Seattle home series, they've won 2 Search and Destroy maps. And since that time, they've won 3 domination maps. And since that time, they've won 5 hardpoint maps. I mean, there are so many problems. It's kind of like Seattle in the same boat that you kind of have to wonder if you're looking at what is your creation of a dam. Do you just have to slap a patch on the hole that's leaking the most amount of water? Because this thing is not retaining any kind of water whatsoever at the moment. I mean, this is a flash flood warning for Minnesota and Seattle at the moment. And yeah, you're lucky to essentially have solidified a top 7 spot before the weekend started. But I mean, I just don't see with how they've played over the last handful of weekends. Yes, you could say they've gotten a touch better in the hard point, but with how bad they've been in search and how bad they've been in domination, I can't see them winning a match in playoffs, if maybe even a map or 2 in playoffs. I mean, it's been really, really bad, and I just don't know what you do from here if you're the Minnesota Rocker. It's just so many questions.
Well, the biggest thing, Alan, is like think of it from like the player standpoint here, where
Oh
like
man, I
you
couldn't
just gotta
imagine.
be like mentally shattered. It's like, okay, we haven't found any success over the course of these last couple of weeks here in our last couple of homestands. Like nothing's been happening, nothing's been working. So it's like, what do we do? And I just have to imagine. I mean, just seeing some of the players' faces today as well. Like looking at God RX, he just seems broken now, and like it just seems so heartbreaking for a team that showed us early success, that we're making a lot of great plays, probably even teaching other CDL teams very early on how to play specific maps and game modes. It's just like what do you do? What do you do at this point in time?
Well, it's a good segue because the next team we talk about is the Seattle Surge after they played up against OpTic Gaming LA, and it was absolutely convincing for OpTic Gaming. Although, to be fair, Seattle out the gate with the Gunrunner hardpoint, they were keeping up in the slaying presence. Everybody was positive, and nearly everybody finished above 27 kills. So that's good news for Seattle. The bad news was it still wasn't enough to win. So after the 250 to 232 loss, then they go to a Gunrunner Search and Destroy, in which that is their best mode, as far map for that mode rather, and they still lost 6-3. And then they got beat up a little bit on the Hackney Yard domination, 160 to 145. And OpTic Gaming are showcasing, at least in my mind, that every single time we get a chance to watch these quote unquote rookies play, they are getting better and better. But beyond that, it's not just Hollow and Draza. They are rising up the power of players like Kenny and TJ, who have been extremely inconsistent all year long.
Dude, absolutely, Kenny. Like, Quavo able to do what he did today is just so good, because it's the exact same Kenny that people were talking about last year in Black Ops 4, where he was doing Kenny things. It's like,
or at least immediately after World War II, right?
Absolutely, right. That's where he, he got in towards the rookie season. That's when he played with accuracy. He was on that TK lineup with theory, accuracy, and I'm trying to think of the third for them. But overall, like they were absolutely just frying, and Kenny made his name. He came in towards the season, and it's like, all right, this guy is here to play. And we haven't seen that really from Kenny the entire year. And I think finally now this OpTic lineup here, especially with the likes of Draza, who's able to play maybe a little bit more off of Kenny with some of their aggression and the smoke play, and how Draza, I think, just plays overall, just fits so beautifully in towards this entire team. And it's now synergizing. They're now starting to get a little bit of practice underneath themselves. And, Kenny, I'm pretty sure the MVP of the series without a doubt, a 1.13. So it's really good to see, all right, not only are the two new rookies stepping up, but you're also getting some of your excellent talent that's been on the roster the entire year that's now also doing the exact same thing.
And I think that's the good news. We were talking about it quite extensively when we were watching the games. This is a team that I think everybody before the year started was sitting there saying these guys absolutely should be top 5 with the names 100%. That they have on their roster. But I think the same thing could have been said for the Seattle Surge. Now, I think the best news was we are getting kind of a side-by-side look, right? Slasher, Octane, 2 staple AR players. You also got players like Apathy and Slack, TJ and Kenny, relatively synonymous. And then you've got 2 rookies that are brought in. I won't say last minute for Seattle, but relatively recently. And you're seeing just stark growth coming out of especially what's happening out with OpTic Gaming LA. I could not be happier for players like Draza and Hollow, 2 guys that I think Draza has really kind of stolen at least my attention over the last year and a half. And Hollow, a guy that's been extremely consistent in the amateur scene over the last, at least 2 years that I've had a chance to watch him play. So I could not be more excited for OpTic Gaming LA. The bad news is the Seattle Surge. I mean, you won't finish dead last because the Los Angeles Guerrillas will hold that anchor down, but you're right in front of them, just barely. Like, if they're holding down the anchor, you're holding hands with the guy that's holding the anchor. You're right there with him, and it's kind of like the Minnesota story. I just don't even know where you start if you're Joey Nubsy or this Seattle roster to figure out what exactly do we have to do to compete.
Yeah, I don't even know what you dive into. I mean, at the very, positive note here is what we can see is like, all right, other players did step up and slay today. Like Proto, I think, probably had one of his best games so far on the actual roster. Apathy also, dropped like a 38 bomb in the hard point. So like there were at least a couple of things where you could say, all right, some players did finally put up some stats and numbers that they could maybe look at working off of, but it just feels like it's so late in towards the season. I mean, also Octane's been very vocal about how this season has obviously went through for them in one of his videos very recently, and it just seems like everything has completely crumbled around them. And it's almost another one of those situations where it's like, all right, are these players just mentally broken from here on out? Like they've had so much success over the years, like Slacked, a long time player before Black Ops 2, like Octane coming in towards the scene and absolutely frying and doing what he does best and continuing to do so, but not finding the success due to everyone else maybe not playing on that same standard that he's at. So it is a tough spot, Alan. Like I honestly do not know where this squad goes really either here at the end of the year, where you are going to be starting losers bracket. You very well might just get 3-0 or 3-1, and that's it for the year.
Here's the biggest standout for me as well, Austin. Last 5 matches that they've played, they've obviously lost them all. They've only won one hard point, have not won a search and destroy, and they've only won 2 dominations. The thing that's more stark than those stats alone is the fact that out of those 5 matches, they have only played Hackney Yard domination. 4 of the 5 that they played had a gunrunner hard point, and 3 of the 5 had a gunrunner search and destroy.
Mhm.
You're playing the same map and you're still not getting better at them. You're not winning these maps. I really, this is the definition of like writer's block for COD. What do you do when you're playing the same map mode combinations over and over again and you continue to not find wins? It's got to be the most frustrating feeling in the world.
It is. And I mean, everyone's been vocal about this. It's like apathy is a great player to work with, but when apathy starts showing frustration, like I
Yeah,
think even
that's
Nameless talked
yes.
about this, right? It's like, all right, I think this team might just be done for. Like apathy is not someone who gets tilted, is not someone who's get frustrated, but Karma ends up leaving just about near the end of the year. You have to bring in a substitute. I don't think Proto, I don't think Panda has necessarily been, the two real staples to be able to, all right, now this team's good. Now they're going to bring things back. It's like, okay, maybe they're just going to fix the holes here and there, but it's not necessarily a full-on solution. So
Right. Well,
this is so devastating for a lot of these players, and I'm sure a lot of them want to just forget this year altogether.
and even for Panda and Proto, like outside of the Minnesota launch weekend, we barely had a chance to watch them play in challengers at all. Like
Yeah,
they
true.
finished top 4 at Minnesota launch weekend. Great, but that was when domination was still 6-minute halves and
Yeah,
instant flips
much
of the
different.
flag. I mean, the game was very different back then. So yeah, I'm right there with you. Let's take a look forward though, as we got another matchup, and this would now reign supreme as the most overall head-to-head plays against one another. The Florida Mutineers once again versus the Dallas Empire. You thought for a second that once again Florida might just have enough to get past Dallas, but the Kryptonite 2 real, and it starts off by way of Shotzi dropping 40 kills on the Gunrunner hardpoint for a 250 to 211 win. A round 11 pushback as well from the Dallas Empire, who had to clutch up in round 10 and round 11. And then from there on out, it was the Hackney Yard domination, of which Dallas has yet to drop a domination to the Florida Mutineers and are now 5-0 versus the Florida Mutineers on Hackney Yard specifically. This is a matchup that for Dallas you're happy to see, because out of all of the other top 4 teams, you hold pretty convincing losing head-to-head records in. But against the Florida Mutineers, you're feeling pretty safe for that.
Yeah, you're feeling great against Florida right now. They've been the kryptonite for sure. And I mean, from seeing a point just about a month and a half ago, Alan, where it was just all Florida, it was all Florida Awakenings in the lineup. This is the best team in the game. And now it's like Dallas is like, we've done our homework. We got you figured out. And I mean, that's been showing in all of their head to heads where they have been taking them down. And it seems like a lot of the times it's been with ease, especially with what we got to see last weekend in the homestand, and well as this one coming through here for us today as well with a 3-0 victory. You can argue, of course, that Search and Destroy was pretty close. Awakening had a lot of big plays today, and almost carried them through, but it was not enough. I'm sure Dallas is just putting so much time into how to shut down this Florida team. They're the best team in the game. Okay, let's find out why they're the best team in the game, and I think because of that, they've now been able to just figure them out. And Florida obviously going to have to change some things up because they lost 3-0, and things weren't as convincing in some of those respawns for them as I was kind of hoping for and expecting.
The thing, though, before we start talking about Florida, just quickly, again, for Dallas, this is a matchup that you feel like you need to win, because it's, again, like I mentioned, the only matchup in the top 4 that you have found favor in. They're now 4-2 in the head-to-head after this comes through. And I think the best news is the fact that they have been convincingly better than this Florida Mutineers team on domination. This is, again, a strategy where Florida bans Gunrunner Dom. So what does Dallas do? You ban Petro, and guess what? You're 5-0 versus Florida on Hackney Yard. It's such a weird boat to be in, I think, with only having 3 maps in the pool. But hey, Dallas has found a way to work this matchup in their favor pretty convincingly. On the other side, though, for the Florida Mutineers, this is tough, I think, to be out this early. Again, when you're in a group where you've got 3 of the top 4 in the same group, it's going to put a pretty difficult position into you, because someone's got to go out. And unfortunately for Florida, they don't find their way through, which they needed to get in to have a chance at breaking into the top 2. They needed to beat Dallas, and they really actually needed to make it to a grand finals, if not win it, to break into that top 2 in full. The good news, though, on the other side is, yes, you've now played Dallas competitively, really, even though it was a 3-0, it was a competitive series. in now 8 maps. Okay, that's good news. The better news, you're 3-0 versus Chicago head to head, and you're actually 2-2 versus the Atlanta face. So you're still feeling pretty favorable as far as how you match up versus other teams. It just kind of sucks that you didn't get a chance to explore how much you've grown over the last week and a half by making it to the playoff.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's honestly something that I don't think that they're going to be too worried about. Also, with the way they responded with on Twitter, it's obviously tough to feel another 3-0 loss
Sure.
for as far as what they're getting. But I think that this team has obviously been very, very lights out. You look up the back end of why they've had success. Well, that's been because Skies is the best they are in the game, I think for sure. And there's an argument that can be made for a couple others, but overall, Skies has been the one that's been shining through whenever this team has maybe shown a couple of signs for as far as not finding the success that they were at the beginning of the year, especially when Pristini had gotten dropped. They're trying to figure out who to, fill in for that. Awakening filled those shoes perfectly. So I don't think that this team is completely out. It's an argument to be made that a couple other teams have most certainly been showing and performing, I think, a little bit over them as of late. But I still have a lot of confidence in these individuals. Havoc also, I think, had a little bit of an off day for as far as what he's typically bringing, which is
Yeah,
again
this
one of
matchup
right,
specifically.
a lot of that submachine gun pressure for as far as in this one. It can be very difficult to deal with because of the likes of Illy, Shotzi, who are looking extremely on form. Also, pretty sure Shotzi had like something along the lines of like 24.5% of the like team kills within hardpoint in
That's
particular, which
nuts.
is just that's just wild. Like that's a submachine gun player that's just putting in so much pressure and just bringing you so much, and it's very difficult to match that. I think that might be the one problem Florida might be having currently with their very stacked AR lineup.
Yeah, we had this conversation before when we talked about like Chicago's front SMG line versus the Atlantas and the Dallases. I think in a lot of people's minds, you kind of mentally put Dallas and Atlanta ahead of Chicago. I think the same can mostly be said as far as Florida goes as well. It really comes down to, I think, mostly going to be maps. I mean, it's weird because there is a little bit of a triangle going out on top right now where Dallas has Florida's number, Florida has Chicago's number, Chicago has Dallas's number. So it's like this really weird triangle of who gets to face up against who. But Florida will be set in that third, fourth position with at least one round bye in the winner's bracket, but not two. Now, moving forward to speak about the other bit of good news and why they are actually set as the number 3 overall seed is the fact that Chicago played up against OpTic Gaming Los Angeles. And I will say in a bit of a surprise fashion, they actually find a
Yeah.
way to lose in 4 maps. But like we were talking about before, and I have to hit it one more time, this matchup to me and what occurred here is showing that Draza and Hollow is making this OpTic Gaming team look brand spanking new. And it's not necessarily just a honeymoon phase. It's because every single player is now showing instances where they're starting to get better and better and better. It wasn't like when Chino was brought on where, okay, Chino's absolutely frying right now. That's why they're winning games. This is all 5 of them are playing at a much higher level.
Yeah, this is beautiful. I think Merck really said it. I know on broadcast, he's like, Hollow and Draza really have transformed this team. And it's something that Kenny and Slasher have also said. Listen, Draza and Hollow actually taught us a lot about this game, which is crazy, right? 2 rookie players teaching a lot of veterans that had not found a lot of success, which has obviously been showing here for us. But this map number 1, I think, is a great little part to start with us because we saw the map number 1, Alan, where it was looking very convincing for Chicago. I'm pretty sure there was a point in time where they were up drastically. It was like 240 to 141 at one point in
Yeah,
time, and they managed
around
to
80,
bring
90
things back
points.
to 250 to 233. And also, Draza, the submachine gun player, dropped the most kills on his team, and he started 7-14 when he was at the P5. So that first rotation of hills, he was obviously struggling. He managed to bring things back to 36 and 32. So just shows you, what he's able to do individually for as far as a submachine gun on a map like Azir Cave, which was why they almost brought things back in towards their favor. So there was definitely a lot of great things that you can talk about this OG lineup, and they've only been together for a month. They still have a whole other month of practice, which is
That's the
probably
scary
one of the
part.
that is the scary part. Like this is
Yeah.
one of the nastiest teams that we've seen that have brought into a couple of new players, and the fact that they've been able to do what they're doing is like you said, it's absolutely scary heading in towards what will be COD champs at the end of August.
Yeah, it's terrifying stuff. I mean, that first map was a really entertaining one. It was just this kill spree after kill spree, hit for
Yeah.
hit, Chicago OpTic back and forth, back and forth. And then Chicago, I would say, even though you don't find yourself in the playoff, that actually locks you as the number 4 seed in total as we go to the playoffs, I believe. But I think that there are still things to take away from the series that you played on the day. Though you lose to OpTic Gaming LA and though you lost to Toronto, both series, with the exception of the unfortunate lag out and disconnect from Pristini, were tragically close. I mean, we're talking a matter of mere points between round 11s and round 10s in the search, 8 to 10 points in the Dom, 20 points in the hard points. Those are all winnable maps. And I think when you
Sure.
take a look back and see, okay, well, this was a mistake. Okay, now you know. You fix those things up and you're ready to go. But I still think that when you look at the playoff push now for OpTic Gaming LA, they are not just still alive, they're actually in a pretty solid position. They have done exactly what they needed to do. Toronto has done exactly what they needed to do, though, as well. These are two teams that don't want to give it up yet. And even though we'll talk about the playoff implications later, it's definitely showcasing that this team can rise to the occasion. And I think that's the more untangible thing that has not been talked about yet is we heard it in the interview with Slasher. What is it going to take for you guys to get the playoffs? We're just going to go and do it. You know, they're just going to take it a map at a time, match at a time, and just go and win games. Or maybe it was Kenny that said it. One of the two, regardless. But it's one of those things that mentality is, it feels like it's refreshing for what we have typically heard from the OpTic interviews, which is we don't like playing the game.
Yeah, and which is obviously something that you have to be able to deal with. Like I think it was Accuracy who I also touched on, who said, listen, this is your job, you have to be able to do this. And I think now that you have another one of those type of honeymoon phases, it's really good for Slasher, I think, in particular, who is someone who I think takes the same approach to the game, very similar to MJ. I think Maven made this reference, on yesterday on the broadcast, where it's like, okay, yeah, he can seem like the bad guy, but someone has to be the bad guy on the team to keep everyone in line and to get everyone on the same page. And Slasher obviously does exactly that here. And when you have a couple of new players that are in the lineup that are having the success that they had, especially Hollow, I think today was the first time we really got to see, okay, Draws has been great, but Hollow's also a solid AR. And that's something I think this OpTic Gaming roster has been specifically missing so far this year, is a really good second AR. And now that they have that with a lot of young talent and some crazy mechanics, everything seems to be fitting together within the puzzle for them, which is just beautifully for any OpTic fans who have been obviously going through the struggle here this entire year.
It's one of those things. It's like all of the changes that we've seen this year. It's been one of two things: either you find the absolute perfect fit, your Pharaohs, your Awakenings, or
Yeah,
you're forcing in a round peg into a square hole. I won't
sure.
say that Chino fits into that mold, but you could say Spart was in that position. Vivid, we're still maybe not sure on. But now you're in a position where OpTic Gaming, you seem to have found that perfect fit. And that's got to feel very, very satisfying after going through a handful of changes, including who's starting, who's not. Remember that JCap used to be on this roster, by the way. We haven't
Right.
heard about that
Yeah.
in a long time. It's been a long time since we've seen what was that original OpTic Gaming roster. So a lot of things have moved away. But the good news, like you mentioned, they do make that final four. And to break that down, it's a bit of a surprise, kind of like last weekend. We had a couple of heavy hitters, then we had a couple of teams that we maybe did not expect. So as far as our final four goes, it's Atlanta FaZe going up against OpTic Gaming LA. The Dallas Empire will be playing up against the Toronto Ultra in two matchups where for OpTic and for Toronto, they both necessarily have to win. Toronto specifically will have to win to get a position to where they might be able to start making an argument for top 8. But OpTic, they win. I think they absolutely guarantee it unless Toronto wins. Again, we'll talk about that in a minute. Let's talk about the individual head-to-head maps up. So when you got Atlanta playing up against OpTic, who you like and why?
Um, well, this is a really interesting one for as far as Atlanta FaZe up against OpTic, because I think that OpTic Gaming is obviously on a bit of a run here. They're on a hot streak, and there's a lot of pressure on the line for as far as what they have to be able to do. And if they do get themselves a win against Atlanta FaZe, well, it absolutely puts them in a spot where, like you said, we'll get to where they might be able to fight for what could be a top 8 spot. So I think that Atlanta FaZe has looked a lot better than they have in months, which is obviously a great look for them. But I think I give a slight edge to OpTic for this one, Alan. I'm going
Whoa!
to say this is obviously, very much, not a favored prediction whatsoever, but I think OpTic Gaming are just at a spot where they found some very big, important wins today, and they were able to kind of grind back after a tough loss to Toronto Ultra yesterday. And that's got to put them in a spot where I think that everything has got to be flowing with the vibes. Kenny looks really good. He's on championship form. He's the MVP of a series here for me today. Hollow and Draza are obviously fitting in great with the back end of Slasher, who's been a solid AR this entire year. And I think everything is honestly just going to come together, piece together for them. We're going to see that tomorrow, and I do think that they're going to pull off the upset.
I'm surprised by that for a number of reasons. A, Atlanta's on a 6-map winning streak.
Sure.
B, you're a Toronto fan, which you're going to be hoping OpTic lose. So that's
I understand. I mean, it does, just because I want them to lose doesn't mean they're going to.
fair enough. I mean, to be fair, last time these two played, it was the 4 to home series in which OpTic was able to take Atlanta to 4, where every single map was extremely close, with the only exception being the domination, which was over at about 60 seconds left. Quickly, before we talk playoff implications, Dallas and Toronto, who do you like in that one?
Well, you know who I like, but for who's gonna win, this one's tough, right? And I'm sure the Ultra fans, they might not like me on this one, but I think that there's a realization that, of course, I want my home city to take this and go to the finals and win the entire event at their own homestead. Like that would just be amazing. But I think Dallas is also a team that I've predicted many times on here to take champs, and I think that they won the last weekend. They had some little shaky starts, I think, yesterday for as far as what they were doing, and as well as today. But I think they're going to fix things up. This is still a team that I have a lot of favor in, and I think that they are going to beat Toronto Ultra 3-1.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think I've got a 3-1 as well, mostly because this is the best domination team in the game in the Dallas Empire. And I think that they're going to find a way to continue to win there. And they're the second best team in Search and Destroy, where the Toronto and Ultra have maybe not looked as nearly as confident as you would like. The thing is, when playoff implications are on the line, wild things can happen. And we've
Sure.
seen that Dallas are not prone or, I guess, immune to making mistakes. Glacier admitted himself that he made a bad call and it kind of cost him a game. That very well could come into play if things get a little bit dicey. But let's talk about what's on the line here for playoffs because there is a lot still to kind of go. At the top, Atlanta and Dallas are essentially playing for first and second. They've locked in top two positions. And really, at this point, it's just going to come down to Dallas, I believe, will have to win the event to take first away from the Atlanta FaZe, who will currently be at 270 points. Dallas, if they win their semi but don't make grand finals, they would also be at 270 points, but they don't hold the head to head tiebreaker. Now, the same situation is also currently unfolding with what's going on with Paris, OpTic, and Toronto. OpTic currently, because they are at a 100-point tie with Paris and hold the head to head, is in the number 8 spot. If Toronto win tomorrow and OpTic lose, if Toronto not even win the whole series, if Toronto just wins one game, gets to the grand finals, we will have a 3-way tie at 100 points where the head-to-heads are a triangle, where one holds a tiebreaker versus another. So it would go to a total match win percentage, in which Toronto currently hold the edge. OpTic would be in second, and Paris, actually, OpTic and Paris would be tied. So it would be a battle for who gets ninth and 10th. Toronto can control their own destiny by winning the entire thing, though. So that's kind of the big outlook. Which of those two do you think is more likely as far as who finishes first, who finishes second, and who do you have finishing eighth, ninth, 10th?
I guess like the most likely scenario is that off of Kleenex's interview, maybe Toronto Ultra do just roll off of the momentum and all this confidence that's flowing their way. Cammy's been frying. Like maybe they do just end up finding a win against Dallas, and then OpTic ends up losing to Atlanta FaZe. I don't think that's what's going to happen, but I think that's a likely situation that maybe could. Again, I don't know what is going to happen with this Ultra squad. The big problem for me is that they've been really hot and cold, and I think that right now they're looking really hot and they're looking really confident off of their win from earlier today. As much as it was obviously very unfortunate in that map for St. Petro, they still beat Chicago in a couple of maps that that are obviously something that they can piggyback off of going in towards tomorrow. So I think that's probably the most likely scenario. And then, of course, OpTic Gaming, maybe they don't win against Atlanta FaZe. They're going to finish ninth, and then Paris end up dropping. I guess they would actually will take the
They would finish eighth,
spot, right?
yeah, because the
OpTic
head-to-head.
Gaming would be able to pass them. So that's what would maybe end up happening, maybe the most likely scenario. But you could argue like 10 different things that could end up happening here. It's really difficult to maybe say what's going to happen. I think it just all depends on, I think Ultra specifically, maybe more than OpTic, on how they look tomorrow and how they come out in map number 1.
Yeah. So just as a kind of recap as far as it goes, Atlanta, you make grand finals, you finish first. Dallas, if Atlanta loses and you win, you actually finish in first. For Toronto, what you're rooting for is essentially to win the event, or you make grand finals to beat Dallas and you have OpTic lose to Atlanta. For OpTic, win, you're in. Toronto lose, you're in. All those things are good for you. So those are exactly the kind of situations that are at hand. And technically speaking, OpTic could actually bump above Minnesota if they win the entire event. So
That's
that's
true.
one more small thing as far as 8 to 7. But let's be honest, if you're in that middle four, you're feeling really good because you're going to have to play up against a New York or a London either way. And it's just, I think the biggest unfortunate thing about this whole situation is that we're not going to see Toronto and OpTic get into a middle four where I truly believe they deserve to be there more than Paris and the Minnesota Rocker do. So, touch unfortunate, but hey, that's the way the regular season works. Win your games earlier, lol. Let's talk viewer questions here. We will be starting to take some here in a moment, but if you're out there watching, you haven't had a chance to submit your questions yet. If you type exclamation point giveaway in the chat, you will get a link to our most recent tweet from CMG, which will allow you a chance to respond to. And if we pick your question to answer, you get 5 free CMG credits. It's like $5 to
Woo!
ask a question if we pick
Pretty
yours.
much.
That's pretty much easy money. It's the easiest money that I could come across.
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't get any easier than that. We've talked about it the whole time. I got a good question. Go ahead and fire it on in there, and we'll give you some good answers as well. So it's a win-win.
Well, I don't. We'll try to give you good answers. I don't know
I'll
if
give you good
we will.
answers. Alan might not.
Okay, I believe that. Um, Interesting question here. And we kind of talked about two of these already, but I think it's important to kind of re-hit them one more time. For Myoto, he asked a good question yesterday. He comes back with another one here. Was Chicago losing to OpTic more due to the fact that Chicago might have fallen off in this meta, or that OpTic is just that good now?
Can I answer both? Because I think that is actually a bit of both. I
I
think that
You can,
um,
because I'm sitting here saying, why not both?
why not both? I think that it's a mix of couple of things. I think it's obviously a practice problem with Chicago, so I just don't think that they've improved from where they were at. And again, teams have been able to catch up a little bit and have put in some good practice. OpTic Gaming, they've been very vocal about, hey, listen, we have not got good practice since day number one with their original roster when they had JCap and Dashi, which has obviously been a massive problem. So now that they've actually gotten Hollow and Draza, the practice has improved so much that it's obviously now shown within their gameplay. So I do think it's a bit of both. I think that OpTic Gaming has obviously gotten just miles better from where they were at before. And I just think that Chicago Huntsman hasn't necessarily got worse, but I think they've just been stagnant and they haven't necessarily improved.
Yeah, I think that I'm right there with you. I think there's a little bit of both here. We talked about how Pristini was looking much better, even yesterday,
Yeah,
when it came down to when he's using that third AR. He's slowing up, he's playing good routes, he's taking good challenges. And
agreed.
then sometimes you find him with an SMG and he doesn't do any of those things. So I think it's a little bit of both of it because OpTic has looked much improved, but at the same point, I don't think this meta is as favorable to Chicago as it is to a team like Atlanta or Dallas, where, like we mentioned all the time, at least on this show, we mentioned all the time, the SMG lines just seem to be a bit of a discrepancy. When you talk about the SMG lines of Atlanta and Dallas, you carry a little bit of extra favor towards them than you might versus, the Chicagos that we've seen. Although, to be fair, Scump and Envoy have had an impressive weekend thus far,
Yeah.
even though they did unfortunately get eliminated. I think that they showed some pretty marked improvement as far as being able to find value out of that SMG. So that's a great question. We kind of talked about this one as well, but I think it's important to hit again, as I usually say that. Evan Leduc has asked, is there a team that you think is too high or too low in the standings? First of all, too high is the Minnesota Rocker based on how they've played over the last
Yeah.
couple of weeks. And obviously too low would be your conversation of OpTic or Toronto, at least in my mind. Um, Anyone else kind of stand out to you as being too high or too low, though?
Maybe, I mean, it's hard to say until we see New York again, but maybe New York. I don't know. Like, I again am kind of, as much as I love a lot of those individual players from the history of, from obviously within the title itself for Call of Duty for such a long time. I just think that I think they just had one good event. I don't think there was a lot of real good, crazy competition at that event either. Really, but I think besides the Huntsman for the most part, and I just felt like they came out swinging. They had themselves. Everyone was firing on all cylinders, and I think they were able to come out because of that. So maybe an argument for New York, but I think other than that, I'm pretty much on board with every single team that you just listed off there.
I'm glad that you brought up the New York subliners because that was going to be my next one as far as potentially being up too high. Because yes, you mentioned it. There was a little bit of a softer weekend. It was in a brand new meta, which I think completely serves to the strengths of New York subliners roster.
Yes.
And then beyond that, everyone decided to play them on Hackney Yard Domination as if they'd never seen them play it before. And they only lost the map once. They literally played Hackney Yard Dom every single series that they played. So, I mean, I think there were some mistakes in the pick and ban process, especially from Chicago, who had already seen them play on Hackney Yard Domination, in which they lost the first time. But that's a rant from, a couple of weeks previous. But yeah, I think that would be my go-to as far as, if you were going to stretch that conversation
Yeah.
behind the kind of givens. I think that New York might be a little bit too high, but I don't think that New York is a bottom four team. So if you were to go off of the classifications as far as your top four, your middle four, your bottom four, the only ones that I would really swap out in there would be Minnesota Paris for OpTic Toronto, which one of those we very well probably will see. As Paris, I think at this point in time has really no way of holding on to that eighth spot if my head-to-head predictions are correct. Even if Toronto wins the entire event or sends thing to a three-way tie, I'm pretty sure Paris find themselves on the outside of that middle four. So good questions coming through. This was a good one. I had a good time. Did you have a good time?
I had an excellent time. Absolute excellent time. As always,
Love
Alan.
to hear that.
We watch the CDL matches all day. We come in and we talk Call of Duty. Couldn't ask for anything better.
It's a lot of cod, but we do like cod. It's good stuff.
We do.
What's your favorite kind of fish? Is it cod?
Um,
not mine.
Yeah, fresh cod, absolutely. Not like
Wait,
frozen and
actually?
like fresh cod. Yeah, like if you've been
Oh,
to
okay.
Newfoundland and
Wow.
had fresh cod like the same day it's caught, it's actually insane.
My
It's
man's out
elite.
here sleeping on salmon, the most versatile fish that's out there. I don't know, man. Salmon burgers, salmon patties, salmon tacos.
Over.
Yeah. Jay Pistachio doesn't know about the salmon burger train. Have you ever had a salmon burger?
I don't think I have.
Dude, they're actually so good. You get like a little dill, like sauce on top of it. Oh, dude, it's heavenly to be sure. We will not be back tomorrow. We've got other things we got to do. I'm sorry, we'll miss you. You looked good today, by the way. You avid viewer. We will be back on Monday though, so make sure you wear your Monday best, as we'll be back to talk about everything going on at the CDL Toronto event and give you a first look on our takes for what's going to be coming up with the playoffs, as everything will be set in stone as everything concludes after the games tomorrow. So for now, we'll say farewell there, friends. I hope you had a good time. And until the next time, make sure that fuse doesn't fizzle out there. So long.